For the first time in our history, it will be a criminal offence for some Australians to come home from overseas. Nine News understands within the next 48 hours, returning citizens will be threatened with 5 years jail if they've been in India in the last 2 weeks.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And that was Nine News, who were first to flag the government's extraordinary move 10 days ago, in which Australians fleeing COVID-ravaged India for the safety of home were told they could end up in jail if they made it back into the country.
From as early as midnight tomorrow, it could be a crime for anyone to come to Australia if they've been in a high-risk country 14 days prior to arrival. The penalty is 5 years jail or a $66,000 fine.
And Chris Uhlmann's intel was spot on, with the Health Minister confirming those harsh penalties in a press release, rushed out minutes before midnight on Friday night. It was an extraordinary escalation in the government's fight to keep COVID at bay. And let's not forget why it was deemed to be necessary.
It comes after two Aussie cricketers exploited a legal loophole, flying home from India via Doha.
Closing that loophole had been a priority for the PM, who had told 2GB's Ben Fordham some 15 hours before the announcement.
I'd propose to take further action today, which would be done under the Biosecurity Act.
So, is it any surprise the media went big on the threats of penal action next day? The shocking idea that we would lock up Australian citizens for daring to come home was greeted with widespread outrage from human rights groups, the Indian community, government backbenchers and Australia's IPL cricketers stranded in India, including batsman-turned-commentator Michael Slater, who tweeted furiously,
"It's a disgrace. Blood on your hands, PM."
But even the government's supporters in the media were raising hell, with the Herald Sun's Andrew Bolt on Monday morning proclaiming,
"To me, it stinks of racism to tell the 8,000 Indian Australians trying to come home that they must stay in India. I can't believe we would impose such a travel ban on white Australians fleeing from, say, England."
Meanwhile, when the PM fronted up to 2GB for breakfast, Ray Hadley was forced to ask his mate,
"Can you elaborate on why you're not racist?"
And as the day went on, it only got worse for Mr Morrison, with a cavalcade of hosts at Sky News, who rarely stick it to the government en masse, lining up to condemn the move.
It is harsh symbolism, a jail term, that needs to be scrapped urgently. It is a terrible look for the Morrison government.
I think it makes a mockery of being an Australian citizen to impose penalties for coming into your own country.
If the government of Australia can't provide the medical advice which justifies this, it's political cowardice of the first order.
When your loyal cheer squad turns against you, you know you're in trouble. And by the next day, the PM was trying hard to pretend that he didn't really mean it, and the threat was overblown.
Well, Carl, as I've said, I think the likelihood of anything like that occurring is pretty much zero.
With respect,
the Border Force, when we put this...
Ago.
No, I'm sorry, Carl. I know what the order said.
OK, so we have had a shift, and there is no doubt about that. I think most Australians...
No, Carl, we haven't had a shift. How you're reporting it is a shift.
Yes, according to the PM, the media's reporting was the problem, and it was all their fault for highlighting that jail time in the first place. Amazing, eh? And soon Scott Morrison was making that argument even plainer to 3AW's Neil Mitchell.
I would argue you've perhaps made a mistake in emphasising punishment, which is what happened. Would you agree that was a mistake?
Well, we didn't. The media did, to be fair, Neil.
I think there was a press statement put out on it, wasn't there, on the weekend by Greg Hunt?
There was simply a statement of what the Biosecurity Act does as a way of fact.
Okay.
This is not something that was accentuated by Greg or Hunt or me or anyone else. It was picked up on in the media, and they've highlighted that.
Yep, blame the media and its reporting. But as David Spears reminded everyone,
it was in a press release from the government.
And indeed it was, leaving Channel 9's Jonathan Kersley to quip.
It's now up to the PM to tell the Australian people whether or not he read that statement.
So, the lesson for ministers and their PR teams: if you don't want the media to highlight your message, don't put it in the press release. Perhaps even more important, don't try to blame them afterwards for your mistake. But now to the Daily Telegraph, the death of an Australian soldier and the story that made his family's grief so much worse.
A culture of cover-ups led to death.
Exclusive.
That story back in January shone a light on what the telly called a suicide pandemic in the Australian Defence Force, highlighting the deaths of military servicemen and the secrecy surrounding them. And naturally, the paper had to put a face to this tragic toll.
It is the fourth defence suicide in less than a month. The last one this week, when Stuart Burney lost his battle with the black dog. The former grunt, who did 2 tours of East Timor as an infantryman and then deployed to Afghanistan as an engineer in 2006, died on Wednesday.
And the telly's photo caption made it crystal clear that the soldier took his own life. That came as a terrible shock to Stuart's wife, Caroline Burney, and their 3 boys, Jacob, Joshua and Johnny, who were already devastated by his death. First, because they had no idea the story was being published. Second, because the telly had got his tours of duty wrong. And third, because Caroline was pretty sure her husband would not have killed himself and left their children fatherless. So she immediately emailed the reporter, Sidonie Martin, with this message.
Please contact me ASAP as Stuart's surviving spouse. Read the inaccuracy of your article today.
She got no response. So a week later, she tried again, this time saying,
I never realised that Facebook was used as a reliable source in journalism today. Or perhaps that is a reflection on the standard of the Daily Telegraph.
Caroline suspected that a Facebook post on Stuart's Army unit page had been the source for the telly's claim, which was entirely speculative. The coroner had not yet given a cause of death, and Caroline was sure that Stuart's mates had jumped to the wrong conclusion. Telling Media Watch,
people knew Stuart was unwell, but just because you're a veteran and you have mental health issues, it doesn't mean you killed yourself. Stuart had complex problems, including PTSD and depression, but I never thought from day one that he killed himself.
Caroline's second email to the Telegraph also went unanswered, but it now turns out that she was right. After a 3-month investigation, the Victorian Coroner's Court has ruled that Stuart Burney did not take his own life at all, and the cause of death was
coronary artery thrombosis.
Yes, that's right. It was a clot in Stuart's heart that killed him and not his own hand. And yesterday the Telegraph acknowledged that verdict and updated their story.
Mum grieves for brave son.
Coronial inquest finds troubled soldier died of natural causes.
But the telly did not say sorry for getting it wrong, did not mention Caroline, and left a number of questions unanswered, such as, why did it rush to judgment in the first place? What was the source for the suicide claim? Why did it not contact Stuart's wife and warn her what the article was going to say? And why did it not respond to her complaints? After we contacted the Telegraph last week, the reporter emailed Caroline to apologise, saying her emails had never been received. We can't confirm that, but we can confirm they were sent to the right address. As for the source of the suicide claim, Weekend Telegraph editor Mick Carroll told us,
a respected veterans advocacy group highlighted to us Stuart Burney's death and battles with PTSD and mental ill health.
Carroll says the reporter also spoke to a family member. He will not say who, but it was not Stuart's mother who was not contacted for the story, and who also complained to the telly, emailing the reporter and pleading for any mention of Stuart, plus his photo, to be removed from the online story. Warning,
as the autopsy hasn't been finished, I have to wonder where you are getting your information, as we don't know that yet.
All in all, it seems an apology from the telly would be in order, and an admission that they got it wrong. And would it really be so hard? But now, to a big story in regional New South Wales, healthcare in country hospitals, and is it up to scratch? And you may remember this from 60 Minutes last September.
I believe my 88-year-old dad would still be here today if not for a serious medical error that occurred while he was being treated in the local health system. This was brutal and it was awful. Dad always stood up for me. Now I'm standing up for him.
That is Star reporter Liz Hayes, whose father Brian died in Taree after not getting proper care. And teaming up with her in that hour-long programme was ABC journalist Jamelle Wells, whose father Alan died in Cobar.
Separately and now together, we started asking questions.
One night in the hospital, we were sitting with Dad, talking to him, and he just looked at me and he said, "Love, I've got a feeling they've done the wrong thing by me. Something's gone wrong."
Jamelle's dad had also died after getting poor treatment, leading to these exclusive stories in the Sydney Morning Herald, and then to that emotional 60 Minutes with Liz Hayes.
This is my dad. We were to take him home today, but we're not, because of what's been called an error. Dad is now dying because of some terrible mistakes that were made with his medication.
That powerful program helped bring about a state government inquiry into health services in remote and regional areas, which is an important issue for those communities. But at the first regional hearing in Deniliquin, there were hardly any media in the room, and only one large organisation, the ABC, was represented.
They heard from local councils, health authorities, support groups and also individuals about healthcare outcomes and access here in the Southern Riverina.
Isadora Bogle filed for TV, radio and online, but with no live streaming of the critical evidence from witnesses, other networks barely covered it, despite big stories like this.
Overworked GPs may quit, leaving Deniliquin Hospital without doctors, inquiry told.
And the second regional hearing in Cobar was no better. Again, incredibly, the ABC were the only mainstream media present, with reporter Gary John Lysart churning out material for multiple platforms, including this interview with ABC Western Plains.
It was quite harrowing, to be honest. And we heard from one nurse who told us about how a person that came to the Condobolin hospital, and it was quite clear to the nurses there that this person was suffering from a stroke, but he had to wait in the car park for 20 minutes with the cook at the hospital because there was just no one on staff to be able to help him.
Lifeside reported more shocking stuff online, like the fact that only 9 hospitals in 38 in Western New South Wales carry blood supplies. But despite this disturbing information, it was not covered on the ABC's 7 p.m. bulletin. And there was not much coverage elsewhere, aside from this on WIN TV in the Riverina.
The inquiry was established following hundreds of damning submissions into the state of the rural health system, which claims chronic staff shortages and overworked doctors. Local health district execs and local council representatives were among today's speakers.
Meanwhile, local Prime TV didn't cover the Cobar hearings at all. Regional media, as regular Media Watch viewers know, has been stripped to the bone, with newsrooms closed and journalists, camera crews and photographers laid off. But once again, no live streaming was provided for those who were keen to watch but didn't have the time or means to get there. So it was impossible for Sydney journalists, a good 9 hours drive from Cobar, to file stories. And to cap it all, 10 days later, there are still no transcripts of the testimony online. So why is it so hard? As this email to the committee from the Sydney Morning Herald and 60 Minutes asks,
given the towns have the capabilities for live streaming, it would be good if an explanation could be provided as to why they are not being used.
You're not wrong. The letter also says that journalists covering future sessions will need to drive 4 hours in their lunch break, followed by 8 hours overnight as the committee moves from town to town, while MPs will be doing the hop by private jet. This is an important inquiry that's received more than 700 submissions. So why is it servicing the media so poorly and wasting this golden opportunity to get its message across? A New South Wales parliamentary spokesman told Media Watch, essentially, they're doing their best and...
New South Wales Parliament is exploring options to trial the streaming of the next hearing.
Well, keep trying, folks. It's not rocket science. And finally, to a special delivery from 7, just in time for Mother's Day.
Well, a 25-year-old woman from Mali in Africa has given birth to nonuplets. 9 babies were born via caesarean in a hospital in Morocco. Halima Cisse thought she was having septuplets, but doctors had missed 2 babies on her ultrasounds.
9 healthy babies is a world record, so it's no surprise that 7 went gaga over the story, running it next day on Sunrise.
The woman who thought she was having 7 babies but ended up having 9. Oh my goodness.
Then rebirthing it for the morning show 2 hours later. And then again on 7's Morning News 2 hours after that. And again on 7 News at 4. And clocking it off with another item on the 6 p.m. bulletin. That is 6 helpings of the Malian mum in 24 hours. But there was just one problem. As one eagle-eyed journalist pointed out, another woman who looks uncannily similar had a similar story to tell 2 years ago.
Fake news. Several news outlets appear to be using photos of a woman who gave birth to 6 babies in 2019 for a story about a woman who gave birth to 9 babies today.
Oh dear. So is that right? Well, a quick Google image search reveals that the woman on 7 was not Halima Cisse and not from Mali. She's a woman in Texas by the name of Thelma Chiaka. who gave birth to 6 babies at the Women's Hospital of Texas in 2019 and who gave an exclusive interview to Good Morning America on Mother's Day 2 years ago. And as you can clearly see here on her Instagram, her 6 children are now toddlers, not newborns. And 7 was not the only one to mix them up. 9 also ran the story with the wrong photo in its 6 p.m. bulletin. Whoops. So, how did the networks get it wrong? We asked 7, which is still showing the wrong photo on its website, but guess what? They did not bother to respond. That is all from us tonight. There's more on our website where you can stream or download the programme and read the full response from The Telegraph. And don't forget Media Bites every Thursday online. But for now, until next week, goodbye.
If you require further information or support on issues raised in this program, please contact Lifeline on 13 11 14.